We have a great lineup today. So this hour-long webinar is going to focus on how libraries and digital portals are responding to trends in digital publishing. We're happy to have with us Lee Sorensen, librarian for visual studies and dance at the Duke University Libraries, who will share perspectives on how university librarians and researchers are finding and using digital resources, including how usage has changed during the pandemic. We are also joined by Patricia Fidler, the executive director of the A&AePortal at Yale University Press, who will discuss insights that Yale has gathered through the process of setting up the A&AePortal. Such questions as how the landscape has changed since the early stages of the project, what patterns have emerged while working with libraries, and what has changed with COVID. So without further ado, Lee, take it away.
Thank you very much. I will go to a screen share immediately here and see if this works. There's that, and voila. Thanks again. I am Lee Sorensen, and I do visual studies for the Duke University. I appreciate being asked to speak this afternoon or today. I don't have very glitzy slides, but it's my thoughts on the current situation, as it says. So let's go ahead and get into it. COVID clearly has thrown either a monkey wrench or had been an opportunity to do things differently. Our collection strategies person told us that we should rethink all our budgets. And that's been really a question mark. There are no, that we're planning, but we have no plans kind of thing. At this point, we're guaranteed 40% of our collections budget this year, and it looks like more likely like 60%, but it's going to be greatly reduced. An interesting fact there is that the Ivy Plus art library group is also looking at serious shared collection development. So this is an issue that is really worth talking about right now. The overall thing I think I'm best profiled to talk about is really discovery. And I thought some things that we all know about, Google will always be the platform for online discovery, regardless of what we design. So as long as we can put this as close as we can to just social media discovery, we're going to be, clearly that's the way to go. And the second thing is that, at least for universities, most of our discovery and searching is course-based. We in universities have a real issue here, what sometimes is described as the Grand Canyon gap. We have two kinds of users. First-year students who know nothing about searching, and it seems like the other group are senior scholars who don't want to fool around, know exactly what they're looking for, and they want to get it. Our question then is how to address both. Why museum catalogs for students, and how does this fit in here? I think one of the things that publishers could do is emphasize how unlike books or articles museum catalogs are. Thinking about this, it's exhibition catalogs and catalogs in general have the best ratio of relevant images to text. I mean, they're way better than books or the usual article. Why? Because museums are invested in the object. So I think that's somehow that would be important to emphasize. Also, exhibition catalogs and permanent holdings catalogs usually have very clear period designations. And this is difficult for students to find. They know what they're looking for, 19th century or Baroque or whatever. But to find that in digital searching tools is very, very thorny. And the other thing, in fact, I've seen this represented in some digital products, is how great the exhibition catalogs and museum catalogs authority is. Students are often told to use peer-reviewed sources, and it doesn't occur to them that museum catalogs are maybe the highest peer-reviewed source around, for at least for the arts. Some issues with museum publications. I think the terminology that we use, I mean, I'm not laying this on you, it's all of us here, is really confusing for students. For example, what's the difference between an exhibition catalog or a permanent holding catalog? I have to explain this to students all the time, and somehow I still don't get through. Some of this designation, this distinction is a little bit muddy. For example, the Walker Museum's performativity catalogs, which are great, consider themselves or call themselves a holdings catalog, and yet I think the performativity ones don't really seem to be what we're looking for in an object-based provenance kind of thing. So I wonder if in some cases terminology could be cleared up. And the second thing is, it would be really important to make the distinction between what's born digital and what is scanned. I like Inquire, for example, the Art Institute of Chicago's breadcrumbs link here. So when you click on it, you see the collection, digital publications, Gauguin paintings, and the name of the work at the Art Institute of Chicago. That's very, very helpful, because students frequently, they do a bunch of clicks and they don't know where they are and they don't know what they're looking at. So to have this reinforced is very, very important. I also like, again, in the Walker catalog, the mention that the products that the Born Digital products that they're offering up, I should say first edition on them. This is really, really important, especially in sites that are likely to change. Sometimes in museum publications, there are really confusing publication titles. And the example I want to use here is something from the NGA. There is in the online platform, there's a book, exhibition catalog called Italian Paintings of the 16th Century. Well, this sounds very much like a permanent holdings catalog. And I know this has been confusing before. If you go to this, because it sounds very much like a permanent holdings catalog, students don't realize that they're not looking at everything that the National Gallery of Art has, even though there's 15 objects in there. It's not clear to students. So if nomenclature generally could be clearer and even in some cases explained, I think that would help. Also, art has these odd publication genres, and I think museum publications, especially digital publications, can get in this quagmire as well. Again, looking at the Art Institute of Chicago, for example, there's in the Gustav Caillebotte, The Painter's Eye. The NGA has scanned this as a brochure, but again, it's not really clear to students that this isn't the catalog, whereas the Art Institute has this wonderful paintings and drawings of the Art Institute of Chicago, which is a digital catalog in that sense. One of the big issues for students, whether they know it or not, is stability of the source. And museum publications are now delving into born digital as well as scanning print sources here. And it as much as could be made a distinction here between what's going to be different in 2 years, when you cite something, is it going to be that page, or are there going to be additions? And both have tremendous advantages, but if that distinction could be made clearer, I think that would help both for citation and for use. Well, I wanted to talk about a couple of case studies and then end up with some observations. I hope I can do this in enough time. Typical case study one for universities are the museum studies courses. These courses have just blossomed in the last 10 years. I've been at Duke 30 years, and these are the new sort of high profile courses, large student enrollments, and a different kind of searching. Frequently, this group they're doing research on museum history and museums and writing proposals and things like that. It would be helpful if all museum publications, museum were standardized in one place. In other words, museum annual reports, museum journals, as well as the publications, the public publications. And even if that were not possible, if they could be offered in one platform, even if you didn't have access to everything. And here I'm thinking of the examples of Taylor and Francis, or the Springer packages, where they'll give you the citation. So there's one place for you to go. You can see everything from the Dallas Museum of Art, but not everything might be accessible to you. You may have to pay extra, your museum might have to pay extra for it, but just to know that it's all together in one place is really, really good. And if any of you ever say that I mentioned Taylor and Francis or Springer as ideal packages, I will come over and trash your house. And then the final thing is access to searching up museums. The museum publications really focus on collectors and collecting, which is a hard area to find in the literature. And it would to go to a museum publications would be a real help. So there we go. Let me go back one. The second area is provenance research, and this is familiar to most of you. Here, I can't emphasize enough that it's really, really helpful to digitize the older copies of your permanent holdings catalogs. And the example I have, again, pulled from the NGA, if you compare the online editions, the holdings, searchable holdings with Fern Rusk Shapley's 1979 Italian prints, the printed version actually has more information in the provenance than the online does. And I'm not really sure why that is, because I would think that you have unlimited space to put in those kinds of things, whereas a print publication only has so much space. But my bottom line here is that the print sources, even though they're out of date, are still a lot of interest for academic researchers. And just a thought, if the bibliography contained in the museum publications could be individually scanned or set with an API or ISBN number to the Z49.50 link, it would be possible then for students who are looking at an online exhibition catalog to link to the library catalog. And I think I am out of time. Is that correct?
I was going to give you another 4 minutes. So
thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Reliable images. Students don't often think of museum publications as the best place for that, ironically. And if their platforms, they could create a delimiter field where they could search for copyright-free images, that would be very helpful. And my only point here in case study 4 is that exhibition catalog essays are so excellent for the reasons we all know, and yet they're not indexed anyplace individually. And if they could, except for Kubicon, if they could at all be added to like art and architecture source or whatever, that would be a huge thing for all of you. So my thoughts. Obviously, museum publication platform should integrate in as many places as possible. I had a off-the-wall idea. What if you could somehow make them available through Amazon and pay Amazon, not the user? I don't know about that. PDF formats are sometimes a problem. It'd be helpful if platforms could link to all the sites available. For example, that if your museum journal is on JSTOR or other things like that. Again, terminology to be clear, emphasize that it's a peer-reviewed content, and this happens often to make MARC records available. Super helpful. Remember that universities really deal with security, so individual users using things to follow the SAML convention is really important. I don't think it's necessary to preserve the page turning things. Students aren't curious about the book as objects. And to be able to list all the other online versions of a source. In my example here is Onion's Bearers of Meaning. It's available via the Art and A&AePortal, but it's also available as a book through De Gruyter, EBSCOhost, and JSTOR. If that could be put in one place, users would at least know a way to get that information. So thank you. I'm sorry I ran over, but I appreciate this opportunity to talk.
No, not at all. Thank you so much. There's so much great information in there. We have one question here in the chat, and then I don't know, I have a couple questions too. But Katie asked how much we can do with titling versus better cataloging and metadata for exhibition catalogs versus collection catalogs. There are many different options, yeah, what would you suggest in terms of increasing clarity there?
Well, I guess my cop-out would be everything. Because we in libraries hope that users will come to our library. Good library cataloging is really important, and the LCSH or not Library of Congress subject headings are not very flexible. So students are used to looking at metadata, and I mean, they're doing a Google search first, right? Duke students first look at Amazon.com to see if the book they want is there. Then they do Google, and the third thing they do is they look at our library catalog. So we're trying to play into those areas. But if I understand the question correctly, I think metadata is probably the most important first step to sharpen up.
I wonder, when you're talking about putting all of the information about what's available from a certain museum in one place, that kind of museum specific portal, do researchers, whatever kind of student they might be, know to actually look at museum websites for this kind of content? Or, have you seen websites that structure this well? Or are there, is it reasonable to think that they're actually going to go to our websites for this, I guess, is a question. I think historically, we haven't thought that they really go through the websites all that well. We think a lot about search engine optimization, but.
Absolutely, they're not going to go to any individual one. And that's why I was suggesting maybe a consortial platform. Again, I think the Art and Architecture portal is a real interesting idea. I'm curious to hear more about the latest on that. We at Duke don't subscribe to that yet, but I think one of the reasons is because we have a lot of the material in different forms, but not electronically. So if that's why I wildly said, well, what if you could have free links on Amazon, which I know is probably an impossibility, but or something like that. If you had one grand one, and again, that's why I referred to the packages that Taylor and Francis or Springer have, where you can buy the whole thing one shtick, and then you actually pay for the parts of it, the subject parts that you want. And the other things, even though they're not available, they say that they're there. And if we had something like that in one place, that would really, really be worth it, and probably preserve the profit-making aspects of the individual ones, which I know in some cases are necessary.
Yeah, that actually, that leads to another question that I have sort of about the profit-making side of this and the free digital catalog side, because I think a lot of the catalogs that you were looking at today, coming from some of our, WUPUDIG organizer institutions, they are free online, that, the purpose is to be widely available. And I've heard in the past that the fact that they're sort of free and widely available has put them sort of lower on the list in terms of cataloging for libraries, because they're out there and they don't sort of have to be bought or, specially integrated into your systems. I wonder if the sort of free versus paid, like how that interacts with your thinking.
It certainly doesn't at Duke. In fact, I think just the opposite. I'm not a cataloger, and I can't say for 100% sure what the priority is, but I certainly know that the things that were sent in batch, like the MARC records, those are so easy to upload that I don't think there's much delay in that at all. And certainly we look at publisher content. You know, if it's something that I order individually, that's going to get cataloged right away. But if I know that technical services has routine cataloging patterns, and exhibition catalogs and museum publications, I would think, at least for academic libraries, would be #1 on the list. So no, I don't think the cost makes any difference at all.
So there's a question here from Janice. Could you explain a little more about linking the exhibition catalog's bibliography through Z39.50? I have to say, I don't know what this is myself, so.
Sorry about it. You know, library jargon, we jump into it. This is another idea that just may not be feasible at all. But I'm thinking when students look at, for example, Art and Architecture Source, the former Wilson product, and they're looking for articles, if they see the article, our linking sources allow because of I think it's either the ISBN or whatever, to link it directly to the library catalog, so they can see something, get it at Duke. The source doesn't provide it electronically, but you click the get it at Duke button, and it immediately can go over to any catalog using those standards. That's super helpful. If students knew that they could do this using an exhibition catalog, I think the use would be really increased. Now, whether that's even feasible with all the books you have, I don't know.
No, that's interesting. I mean, I know in the Philadelphia Museum of Art's catalog, there's a lot of linked, you know, primary resources in there, which has been mentioned in some of our studies as one of like the real benefits of that digital platform. So I feel like this is a similar recommendation. And Katie asks, actually, smaller institutions.
I thank Christina for introducing the ARLIS-NA initiative platform, the humanities platform in this. I didn't mention it. I'm grateful that she chatted it in. Okay, thanks.
Well, I wonder if you want to speak a little bit more about how working with ARLIS, or, you know, and I do think this also relates to Katie's question. She says, for smaller institutions who might not have in-house libraries, how can they ensure that MARC records are created? I think we've heard in the past that trying to make sure it's on ARLIS's radar is also helpful. So I wonder, when it comes to creating MARC records or interfacing with other library organizations, what would you recommend?
Well, ARLIS is the end all and be all. You know, I'm a member for all these years, and I've really been impressed in the recent years. The digital interest is there. I'm not an expert in digital products, but I like to lurk on their discussion groups because you learn so much. Clearly, even if you sent that out or had a presentation at an ARLIS conference, this year's ARLIS conference is going to be the first one that's digital. It would be made for something like this. And you could, if you threw out comments, I know you would get tons of feedback, even in chats or whatever. Is that what you asked?
Yeah, that's great. I also just wonder about creating MARC records, especially for small institutions that don't have dedicated librarians or library help.
You know, I don't know. I don't know how small libraries work.
Okay.
I would think so. I don't know.
Totally. Nope. Appreciate it. Sarah Sapphire says here that OCLC may be able to create MARC records. So maybe that's something that we could look into. So thank you so much, Lee, for answering our questions and for your presentation. It's so interesting to understand how these catalogs are used by libraries and how we interface with libraries, because, you know, it takes a lot of work to make sure that we're connecting with all the right people. So thank you. So we'll turn now to the A&AePortal with Patricia.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I think we could all ask questions for a lot longer, so maybe I'll reach out to Lee separately. Just to make sure that everyone knows, Sarah Sapphire is my colleague from the A&AePortal, and she's the one who knows about a lot of the technical stuff. So she's on to keep me accurate and also to answer more technical questions that you might have. Sarah, do you have the slideshow? Great. I know that many of you do know about the A&AePortal, but we thought it might be a good idea just to give you, again, a brief overview of what our objectives were, where we are, and where we're going. So this is just a screenshot of the current homepage. So again, we're going to also talk about COVID and what that has, the impact that's had, share a little bit of preliminary uses data. And then we have some questions for you that hopefully you can think about, and perhaps we can engage in further conversations about what museums need. So in the beginning, we wanted to build a platform that was specially tailored for illustrated books because of the frustrations that most people have, or sort of the lack of satisfaction that most people have with traditional ebooks or other attempts that have been made to create something meaningful. We decided that we needed to think in a different way. We wanted to build a site that you could search by image as well as do a formal text search. We have a built-in online reader so that this allows you to have and engage with the images. There's an image viewer that allows you to zoom in on images to see more detail. Very, very important that we had robust functionality and searching. There are things that we did in order to ensure that happened, and that's kind of metadata, which, you know, I won't bore you with, but that's really been an important part of what we've been doing. We started out without a print, and then we started adding some backlist titles that are, you know, still in print, of course. And we've gone now to front list. We have a lot of authors at Yale who are publishing their print monographs with us who want their book on the portal right away. So we are accommodating that because we think it's a really interesting idea in terms of, you know, we're going to be looking at usage stats and determining, you know, what does that mean for the print publication. So far, anything that we have on the portal that also exists in print from Yale's list, we have not seen any cannibalization of sales so far. We also wanted the site to be able to offer born digital publishing. We also built the site. Many of you have heard me talk about fair use, how much time we spent with lawyers building out a site that would accommodate, should you choose to, assert fair use for images on the site, and that the site include content from a variety of book publishers. That was the mandate of the Mellon Foundation when we started this project, and it is very important that, you know, they wanted us to build something that not only was suitable or helpful for Yale, but for every art book publisher who publishes scholarly material. Next slide. Yeah, we started in 2012. We've had 4 grants from the Mellon, and the final one ends in June 2021. We did offer a free trial of the site in July 2018 for a year. We did the formal launch of the portal in July of 2019, meaning we're selling subscriptions to the site. COVID-19 was when, you know, it became chaotic. Maybe not chaotic is not maybe a fair word, but there was such a level of urgency for people to have access to digital content. We decided to extend free trials through spring of 2020 and actually went into the summer for a number of librarians. It didn't change our objectives necessarily, but it changed the pace at which we felt like we needed to bring more content to the portal. We have a business plan for the next 5 to 7 years, at least, building out our subscription base, continuing to add new titles every year. And we will be forming an advisory board in spring of 2021. So I think it will be important as we continue to grow the platform to hear from various stakeholders what are, ideas or things that we need to take into consideration when determining future of the portal. We have 15 publishing partners. They're all listed here. I won't read them off. I thank each and every one of them for coming on board, and particularly the Art Institute of Chicago, who stepped up very early when we needed a partner to prove to the Mellon Foundation that there could be significance or that it could be productive for us to bring in other partners. So thank you, Art Institute. We also working with some research institutes. We have the Image of the Black and Western Art series, all 11 volumes on the site, thanks to the Hutchins Center at Harvard, and the Terra Foundation is now one of our publishing partners as well. Be interesting to see how that evolves, because I believe we'll be collaborating with them on some Born Digital projects. Our goal is to get 250 books up by June of 2021. We're at 220. We're going to make it. I'm pretty sure we already have 41,000 images and related metadata on the site. The metadata is what takes us the most time, preparation of the metadata. Again, so it's a very important part of what we're doing. We have 24 subject categories. We have monographs, exhibition catalogs, collection catalogs, catalogs of raisonné, and we are featuring series, including the Pelican and then the Image of Black Art. And we have recently begun, it was always built into the site, but we didn't activate it initially, but we now are offering certain books open, they're free. Anybody can go to the site and find them. And there've been various reasons for that, but it was something that we wanted to experiment with. And it is something that the usage stats are very interesting also to follow. We're open in the US, Canada, UK, Australia. Those are the territories that are available to us because of the fair use potential of the site. We will be moving on. It gets much, much trickier, as you can well imagine. But we know that efforts are being made on a number of fronts, not only with the portal, but and with museums in lots of different ways. So hopefully this will continue to evolve and we'll be able to broaden the reach. We've launched individual subscriptions to the site just this month, again, to accommodate those scholars who are not associated with an institution that's subscribing. And to give you a sense of where we were in March 2020, we've had 126% increase in the number of institutional subscribers. It became very clear very quickly how needed, how essential it is to have a place to go for authoritative content in art and architecture. Okay. So early usage data, just showing you October year to year, 150% increase in individuals accessing the site, and a 203% increase year on year in institutional usage. So you'll see there's a Google Analytics and a Platform Analytics. We use both in terms of assessing usage. The platform analysis has a built-in reporting and analysis system. So we're using both in order to capture as much information as we possibly can, either to corroborate or to see if it's in fact different. So the portal is growing, it's healthy. We see every month more usage and putting more books up onto the site. So we're happy with it, but we also know it's a very challenging time, that, as Lee mentioned, with librarians and budgets, and there's so many different ways in which the money could be spent. We're aware of that, and we're trying again to respond to and hear, acknowledge what's going on out there. So if there are things that we can do with the portal that can be helpful, we're trying to accommodate them. And that's where it comes to a set of questions for you. Again, the portal is still evolving, and we're learning things every day. And I think that some of the things that would help us to know is, how urgent is your need to provide books electronically? I get, I don't know how many emails from either authors or librarians who say, this book is being taught next month. Can you get it up? We've been working at that kind of pace going forward, but I think it's important to know, in terms of your priorities for your museum publications, how urgent they are. What content is most important to you to provide an electronic format? Should the portal have an option to include a PDF download? This is something we have heard suggested from a variety of our publishing partners now, and it's something we are looking into. Should it be something that is proved to be necessary and or helpful? How important is offering your content for free? Again, this is a subscription, but we are able to selectively allow content to be made available for free. Obviously, we need to build that into the longer term strategy, business planning, that kind of thing. But it's important to understand that. And the question of how are you determining how your content can be made as discoverable as possible, and how meaningful is it for your content to exist, in the same place as other relevant scholarship. This is a very important part of why we even built this platform, was that, again, we cannot be fully comprehensive, but our efforts, our aim is to continue to build out content in those 24 subject areas, and that these books already are speaking to each other. We link, in a footnote, if a footnote references another book on the site, it's linked directly to that particular reference. We are, trying to make things, again, the connections, the scholarly connections, it's really fun to see. How much do you need a platform or some way to launch Born Digital publications? And again, Born Digital publications that would exist within, the backlist, the out of print content. We did a book on global impressionism over the summer, our first Born Digital book, and we have a lot of books on the platform relating to impressionism. So I think it was really great to see how people are engaging with the content that way. And also the fact we wanted a portal, wanted a platform that allowed us to think more creatively. As Lee mentioned, there are many, many sort of classic exhibition catalog essays. We can just put up an essay. We can put up a part of a book. We can put up, it was built to accommodate books and, chapter keywords and do all of that. But we can think creatively about how it is that your publications or content can be put onto the portal. And so it'll be interesting and fun to see where we might go with that. And that's all I had. Sarah wants to make sure that we do provide MARC records with the portal. So for librarians, that was something we heard very early on, and we do provide those. So that's something you can take note of. And Sarah, did you have anything else to add?
I think you covered everything. I'm happy to respond to any other questions that come up in the conversation there.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
This is Katie from the PMA. Thank you so much, Patricia, for sharing that. And I had a couple questions, and this touches on some things that I know, like you and I talked about, a few weeks. We keep revisiting joining the portal with you about every 6 months, and we get a new legal lawyer, and then we start the conversation again. But two things that I was wondering about. One is also maybe kind of building off a little bit of something that Lee talked about, which is, some of these publications or, backlist publications might be available in kind of multiple different platforms at this point. And I guess, are there any restrictions placed on people who choose institutions who participate in the portal to give exclusivity for their title? So if, we had, for instance, on one of these MOOC Did calls, a representative from the Internet Archive, and talking about that being maybe kind of a quicker and dirtier way to get you know, to get publications up, to make them available without the kind of additional features that you've mentioned in terms of kind of having that, the searchability, the metadata, and all of those other things. But if an institution or a museum were to pursue doing something like that, would that preclude participation in the portal? And then just another thing, and maybe that you could share, just because it was sort of interesting, that you, just anecdotally interesting that you had mentioned, is just what are the kinds of titles that you have seen now that you have gotten kind of increased usage and know a little bit more about people, how people have been interacting with the portal? Like, what are areas that you see that people have really responded to, or that are either, you know, expected or unexpected, in terms of interests that you've seen around kind of themes or topic areas or things like that? Two unrelated questions, sorry.
Right, it's okay. Well, with regard to exclusive content on the site, no, we don't insist on it, but it is something that we want everyone, and I think librarians want everyone to be aware of. You know, there's a point where it will become sort of chaos in terms of where do you find how to find different things and overlapping content. You know, if we're going to ask a librarian to pay for a subscription for our site, we want to be as, you know, cognizant as possible about how much of that content a librarian could find elsewhere. So are they paying for it twice? You know, those are things that we're asked quite frequently. But having said that, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to say, no, it could only be on the architecture e-portal, because we understand, you know, the digital, the kind of beauty of digital is that it can be made available in multiple places. But we do feel strongly that the experience of having a book on the portal is completely different and much more meaningful than a PDF that might be on JSTOR or something like that. So we do believe firmly that there's value added. There's the metadata, there's the image searching, there's all kinds of things. So, you know, sure, it's competition in a way, but our experience is very different. Usage is really, really interesting. It's so early to make any kind of generalizations, but we do see each month, we can tell immediately when something is assigned to a course, because it just skyrockets. The usage data. We had a book over the summer that dealt with 17th century photographs from the Middle East. It's a very scholarly book. It had huge usage over the summer because it had relevance to a particular course. I didn't expect that. We have the most, I think, still is the most accessed exhibition catalog is the Yale Center for British Arts, Art and Emancipation, which is the book about an artist named Belisario, Caribbean artist, 18th century, huge usage. And we can also, you know, eventually we will find ways to be able to pinpoint, well, we can now see it, but which chapters within which books are actually being consistently or more frequently accessed, and why might that be? We have huge amount of usage of the portal in the UK. It's great, but you know, universities say, well, one university will sign on and immediately you can see all the books that we have on the portal that are relevant to them. So it's and last month, the books that were used the most frequently, it will change again next month. And so it's going to take a while. And the other thing that we've been able to determine is you know, when you publish a new book, you're going to get most of your sales within the first 6 months, right? It's the opposite on the portal. When you publish it, when you put it onto the portal, it takes time for the book to be, I guess, acknowledged, understood that it's there, or that some professors are now building syllabi around what they can rely on being on the ePortal, because they can't rely on their libraries being open.
Patricia, it looks like Greg asked about how traffic patterns or some of the usage has influenced acquisition. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I mean, again, it's still really early days. The acquisition of content for the site initially was to just kind of building blocks of books, again, that had relationships to one another, not necessarily because they were in the same, subject area, but that I could see the connections between them as we were building out the content. For the past 8 months, it has been responsive. It's been responding to specific requests. So we evaluate the book, we look at it, we can see, how many courses it is applicable to, and then decide yes or no to put it on the portal. Yes, over time, usage will be an indicator of what people want and how they want it, and all kinds of things like that. Usage is going to be the primary driver, but it's just, like I said, it's too early right now. I didn't know that a book about 18th century drawing in Britain would have the highest usage, but it was last month. I mean, I would never have thought that, just because, it just seems, again, like a fairly specialized thing. But it's tons of people are accessing it in the UK. So
I had a question about PDFs, and in some ways it's a question for both you, Patricia, and Lee. We've heard a lot about using PDFs, about museums using PDFs to easily get their backlist titles up on a website or share it. And I know that, as a grad student, I pretty much only looked at PDFs. I mean, the sharing of course packeting and materials often happens via PDFs. And of course, the A&AePortal site has so much interaction, this ability to connect from one thing to another, to see higher resolution images, the portal reading experience is so much better than a PDF, I think, for if you're looking at it online. But Lee, you also said that there are some problems with PDFs. And so I'm just sort of curious, as museums are thinking about ways to share content, what you see as sort of the reason to put PDFs on the A&AePortal. And also, Lee, if you have anything to add about PDFs specifically.
Well, the PDF question. It's been one, again, when we've been hearing from some of our publishing partners that there is a sense of urgency, that got to move really fast. I've been told I've got to get this number of books up, and we're trying to respond to that by saying, well, okay, maybe we haven't decided, but maybe we have a PDF option that's available. We'd have to make sure all of the content interacted. But I think we're at the moment, and Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong, we're leaning toward a PDF download because it seems like that's what everybody is so used to. If you're going to download the content, not in terms of the original presentation, but to take what we have on the portal and convert it to PDF just for the download. We're wondering if that, you can download the content now, and it just doesn't look like a PDF. So we're trying to find our way here and be, again, responsive to what we're hearing from people. And so that's we have conversations about PDFs all the time. So it will, any feedback that anybody can give us would be helpful in terms of, again, understanding what museum publishers need, how they want their content to get out into the world and in what form.
Just one thing to add on PDF. I believe, I can't remember where this was when we did our digital catalog study, sort of where PDF download was in terms of the desired features, but I seem to recall from the focus groups and from what we learned is that it is something that people did value, and that they kind of will use things in a hybrid way, like the expectation of oh, we want this integrated interactive thing, but sometimes it's you just need something to read on the plane and not have to when you don't want to chew up Wi-Fi and do whatever or something, that's where they're more comfortable taking notes, And so it just seemed like that was definitely a feature that people valued, even though, you know, primarily they were kind of, it was more about like using the thing to kind of get them to find the content that they were interested in. And then when it got to, you know, having the format that was maybe easy for them to save in their research folder or something like that, like, you know, or you know, print out, that was something that they just kind of from just a practical standpoint appreciated having.
That's interesting. That makes sense.
We have a question here about accessibility features and the A&AE portal. So what kind of accessibility features are baked into the publications offered through the portal? Might the portal be an attractive way for publishers to offer accessible publications when they don't have the resources to pursue that goal on their own? Also relating back to PDFs, which, you know, are sometimes not that accessible.
Sarah, my dear.
Sure. Well, the platform's designed to support WCAG 2.0 level AA. So it's, you know, because of the nature of the content being in an XML format, it does make it a little easier to offer that level of accessibility. I believe that you can make PDFs accessible. You can,
Yes,
there
definitely.
is formatting. So I think that even if, for, you know, you just have to make sure that the PDFs are set up in such a way that they are accessible. So, you know, certainly our system allows something, if you have issues with vision, you might have your computer sort of reading the content to you and describing it. All of the, you know, the images are sort of read out and everything. So in that sense, all of that is sort of baked in per se to the way that the system works.
Could I ask a follow-up to that too, Sarah? So one of the things we've been challenged with at the Getty is really working through alt texts as well for images. So for those who don't know, it's just a visual description of an image that would be read by a screen reader for someone who can't see the image or for whatever reason. And that is a real challenge when you're talking about a book that's got several hundred images and maybe it's a backlist book. Is that something that you've had to deal with the A&AE portal?
Yeah, we don't provide descriptive language on the images. It might just say that this is the title of this work. I remember at least a year or two ago, there was some, you know, I'm sure someone is working on something interesting to do that as in an experiential startup way, but we don't integrate anything like that currently.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I was only going to plug our digital publications and accessibility webinar from back in the spring. We heard a little bit from the folks in Michigan who are working on some really great resources related to digital publishing and accessibility. So, okay, well, I think we're coming up on time. I don't know if any of my fellow organizers have any last questions here.
One thing that I'll add and that I'll throw in the chat, just sort of circling back more to Lee's presentation and the idea of findability and sort of best practices. I'll just put a reminder that we have a document that's a sort of living document that's linked to on Mupudig. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat of just really sort of a knowledge that was assembled over time as we worked on trying to figure out ways to make our digital publication more, you know, findable, some strategies. I think particularly I would encourage any of the our librarian friends who are on the call, if they have ideas on here of just some basic stuff. I think following back to some of the stuff that we talked about, that's like beyond having, oh, thanks, Greg. He did it already. Beyond, you know, having I guess, figuring out, particularly for smaller institutions, how do they plug into, the best way to catalog these things to make them aware? Is there like literally like an email address at our list that they could send things to? Like, just what is the sort of network that they could sort of plug into? So so please, you can see the doc that Greg shared. It has contact info there for emailing if you have some other ideas or some things to add there. It really is intended to be a kind of work of this community, helping to share their own experiences and the luck that they've had in getting their stuff out there.
Thank you, Katie. All right, so we're coming up on the hour. So thank you again to Patricia and Sarah and Lee for your presentations today. This is so useful and so interesting to understand. I'm sure you'll hear from other questions, other questions from people. And thank you everybody for attending. This actually closes out our first year of the Museum Publishing Digital Interest Group, year of webinars. We started in January and we're very excited to have gotten here to number 6. We will continue this coming January. The next iteration will be back at our usual day and time, Tuesday, January 26th at noon Eastern. But we encourage you in the meantime to sign up for the mailing list and get in touch with us. We're eager to hear what you've thought of this sort of year of programming. So please reach out, let us know what you liked, what you would like to hear more of, and if there are any topics that you think would be super useful in your work, in your museums or libraries or institutions, and we'll all be in touch. So thank you.